Welcome back to another edition of Track Walk in MX Simulator, where today we're going to play the 2024 Round 1 of WSX World Supercross, as you may know it as, from Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. That race just happened literally last night, so we'll do a little bit of spoilers today. We'll talk about this track, talk about the series, and a couple other things. But this track was made by Jared Gumeson on the forums. Gumeson has raced pro in sim for, 4 or 5 years now, so he's pretty good. He's talented at the game itself, and it looks like he's put out a little bit of a banger track for us. He actually released this track a little while back. It's almost 2 weeks now since he put this track out. But now that the race has actually happened, I feel like it would be kind of fun to talk about the track and how it was built, how the race went a little bit. And I also want to know basically who watched, because Eli Tomac, Ken Roczen, they're there. It's a pretty interesting, I guess, fight to watch them go against each other. The series is trying to get its footing back after, changing ownership and investors and all this stuff like that. And, I watched a decent little bit of it, but I could understand for some people why it was confusing on how to watch or where to watch or anything like that, or that it was even going on in the first place. So kind of want to know your guys' thoughts on, did you catch the series last night? Did you watch the racing at all? And then what did you think of it as well? So I'm going to get into some of my thoughts on that. I'll, like I said, spoil it a little bit today. But I want to talk about this track first of all, and what I think is actually a good positive direction for WSX in year 3 of this program, because the IRL track was a little bit softer and ruddier, as many expected it would be. The Canadian rounds always tend to have a little bit more of that soft dirt in it. But like the layout of this track, I feel like is very, close to what we'd see in a Monster Energy Supercross race. And they actually had more than the 9 whoops rule that Monster Energy Supercross has been instituting lately. So they actually made like a couple changes that I guess people generally would like with some of that stuff. And then the rhythm lanes and everything like that, I was like, okay, genuinely a pretty gnarly racetrack. The only thing that I felt like didn't work well was this section after the whoops, and it actually had sick front flip there. It had like a little double to the inside right here. You could just go outside and stay low, but like all through here it was really tight all night long. Guys would go inside and they would either roll or double through here. Eli Tomac was going outside, going triple single for the most part. So was Ken Roczen. But layout wise, it didn't necessarily, I guess, produce the best racing. But it just looked like a standard Supercross track, which in the past, I feel like WSX had missed the mark on. They had kind of underwhelmed in that department with like some very stale-ish Supercross tracks, not really breaking the mold to do something new or exciting, and also kind of taming everything down a little bit, I think, because they knew they had riders that were not fully talented on a full-end Supercross track. And there were some guys that crashed and everything last night, but for the most part, it was a safe event, and everybody got through all right. So, I think it just kind of proves that the best riders will still come through and make it work. But anyway, like I said, I kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts and opinions on WSX after this whole rebrand and everything like that, and, see who watched. So spoiler alert, if you haven't watched already, Eli Tomac won. I don't think that was a big shock necessarily, but he did actually kind of take it to Ken Roczen, I feel like, a little bit. For the most part, all night long. He won Super Pole, I believe, and then went 2-1-1-1 in the 4 main events that they have. It's a very confusing format. It's like a Triple Crown 3 main event format, and then they have a super final where they combine the 250 and 450 classes together, and somehow that also counted for full points too. Anyway, point being, Tomac was pretty much the dominant force almost all night long. Roczen did beat him in the first race, but I think that Tomac kind of was probably better all night, and then Roczen just had a little bit better first moto. But other than that, I think it was Eli versus Kenny, and not close to really anybody else's even a challenge. Roczen went down in the second race twice and ended up 11th in that one. But then, so his overall, he got second overall, but he went 1-11-2-2, so it looks a little bit skewed. But again, I think he was clearly the second best guy. We had, Joey Savacci was there. Forget, Colt Nichols, I guess, ended up on the podium, right? I think it was third overall. I'm trying to remember if he was third overall. But 250-wise, Shane McElrath won in the 250 class. Max Anstie was there as a wild card. He's not racing the full series, but he was the defending champion, so he got to go up there and run the number 1 plate. And McElrath was just consistent. Anstie won, I think, the first race and then crashed a couple other times in the other 2 races, so he was a little bit more chaotic and wild. I don't know. to me, I just feel like the results were very status quo, pretty much exactly what we expected. And for me, then it boils down to how was it as an event? Stadium wise, it's a pretty large stadium. So I think if you were watching it, you probably thought, man, there's no one there because, they really only filled up like kind of the lower bowl of the stadium on either side of what would be like the middle field. If you're looking at a football field, like the 50-yard line on either side was kind of packed. But other than that, like the end zones were almost empty or pretty empty. They didn't have any people, I think, either on the second or third deck. From people who were there, most everyone said that there was like 15 to 20,000 people that went, which actually is not that bad in my opinion, just because, in reality, like there are plenty of stadiums that they have gone to in the past that only held 20,000 people. And so to sell that out, it was like, dang, this is popping. But in reality, like if this stadium only fit 15,000 people, they could have also called it a sellout. It just happens to be a massive stadium. But anyway, I don't think it was, really a problem too much with a lesser crowd or anything like that. Generally speaking, I think it was an okay event. It wasn't a banger. I don't think that they hit it out of the park necessarily with nailing everything. We still have cardboard tough blocks. We have very weird kind of I like how the FIM kind of runs it all, and the podium ceremonies was odd. Didn't really kind of seem to flow together. The TV broadcast was also very weird. Ralph Shaheen and Jeff Emig on the calls, so anybody that's watched Supercross over the years obviously knows those names, and if you tuned in, you're like, oh, it sounds like an old Supercross broadcast. But they tried to clean things up a little bit this year. They didn't talk about like all their storied history of being the World Supercross Championship, which started in 2003 and was run in the AMA circuit. Like they didn't go down that rabbit hole necessarily, so I think that's a positive step because they don't need to. They can just basically call this their own deal, and I think it's still fine. We heard a lot about glacial till, which is the dirt that was brought in. Never had heard that term in my life, although I'm sure a lot of people that live in that area have. But yeah, there was a lot of glacial till talk. Very interesting dirt dynamic, I suppose, in the stadium. And then, so now we get to head into 2 rounds back-to-back in Australia in basically a month. It's a 4-round series, 1 round in Canada, 2 rounds back-to-back in Australia, and then a finale in Abu Dhabi. But we got to wait a whole month for things to happen again. Eli Tomac is 16 points, I believe, up on Ken Roczen in the championship after 1 of 4 rounds. So I don't know if anything's going to really change there necessarily, but who knows? Could eventually, swing back the way of Kenny Roxton's favor. But yeah, I think overall, I like to see that they had a real track. I like to see that the series even happened because there's a lot of question marks about it happening. A lot of teams pulled out. They only have, I believe, 6 official teams that are putting out programs, or maybe 7 actually. I might have that backwards, but not as many riders. They still have 2 classes, which was another question mark. They were maybe not going to have 2 classes, and they scrounged together to have 2 actual classes show up and race. And the format is exciting. It's interesting that the way they do it is there's 3 main events and they run it back to back to back. So you have to come off the track if you're a 450 guy and get right back on the gate. Basically in about 5 minutes they drop the gate again, so it kind of keeps them all on their toes and maybe changes things up a little bit. So everyone's not 100% fresh rolling to the gate every single time, but at the end of the day, still the top guys kind of showed up and did what they do. Vince freezed a little bit. He was kind of doing some blocking, cross-jumping on Roczen while Roczen was trying to pass him in the first main event. And then he was messing with Joey Savacci in the second main, I think it was. Savacci ran him high, and then Freeze, trying to cut down out of the corner to not get Savacci back in the next straightaway, got absolutely lit up by Mitchell Oldenburg, which I think a lot of people probably giggled at just a little bit. And then Freeze did it again, like was messing with Savacci in the third race, and Savacci just about put him all the way off the track. I don't really care that much about what Vince is doing because I'm not on the racetrack myself, but you can tell that the riders are pretty sick of it at this point. So very interesting to see how that goes every single time he hits the track. And generally speaking, interesting event. So who watched? I want to know what you guys thought of it if you did watch. Were the results any different than you expected? Was the track better than you thought it would be? Do you still think that this series is going to be successful is another big question as well, because there was so much promise that was unfulfilled the first 2 seasons of it, basically. And And, you know, they have this huge switch over, new investors. They're trying to come at it with a different approach. They even had the CEO literally on TV talking about their strategy and how they're going about things and stuff like that. So that's all, I think, a good move, in my opinion. But you guys might have a different opinion. You might want to, you know, see it be a bit more polished or look a certain way, and it didn't look that way. I don't know. But if this is truly what it ends up being, you know, like if we can get WSX to the point where, let's say, maybe it's a 8-round legit off-season championship and we can get more and more top guys to race it, I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's nice to have more, you know, opportunities for guys to go there and make some money. I certainly know that Eli Tomac and Ken Roxon are making some good money doing this race. And then the guys that are wild carding, I'd have to imagine, didn't exactly scoot by with nothing. So that's good too. More opportunities for even privateers to make some money as well. So yeah, you know, it's just nice to see that it actually came together and worked this year. But we still have some questions that I think need to be answered, and we'll see what happens when Perth, Australia comes around for round 2. So this is another edition of Track Walk in MX Simulator, round 1 of WSX from Vancouver. Let me know what you guys think of this track and whether or not you guys watch WSX. But thanks for tuning in regardless, and I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you in the next one. So long for now.